In 1926, a French inventor patented a device claimed to triple crop yields. No chemicals, no machines, just a simple copper wire capturing energy from the sky. Official records, grainy photos, and a British committee all vouched for results like 10-foot corn and monster pumpkins. Then the technology disappeared almost overnight, as if erased from history. We have all heard that bigger harvests require more fertilizer, but what if we traded a law of physics for a bag of chemicals? Here is why the science behind one wire and the industry that buried it could change everything you think you know about your food. Justin Christofleau was not a household name in the world of science. He was a farmer, an experimenter, and a relentless tinkerer, born in France in 1865. By the early 1920s, he had spent decades chasing a single idea, that plants could thrive not just on nutrients from the soil, but on invisible energy drawn from the sky. He poured his life into building strange devices, metal rods, spirals, and antennas, staking his reputation on results that defied agricultural orthodoxy. On October 26, 1925, Christofleau filed a patent in Switzerland for what he called the electromagnetic celestial apparatus. The document, stamped CH118648A, and granted the following May, described a system of copper and magnetic steel plates designed to capture atmospheric electricity and channel it into the earth. This was not some backroom theory. The patent is still on record, a legal artifact that spells out every wire, every plate, every connection. Christofleau's drive came from the fields themselves. He claimed that with his device, oats grew 5 feet tall, and old dying trees burst back to life. He published his findings in books and agricultural journals, inviting scrutiny from anyone willing to visit his experimental gardens. The press in France covered his work, sometimes with skepticism, but often with wonder at the photographs and diagrams he provided. For Christofleau, the proof was always meant to be public, measured in harvests, not in secret. Long before the rise of chemical fertilizers, he believed that nature already provided everything a plant needed, if only we knew how to listen. His patent remains, a silent witness to a forgotten chapter in the science of growing food. Photographs from the mid-1920s show vegetables that seem to belong in a different world. Pumpkins wider than barrels, cabbages nearly as tall as a person. These images, published in Justin Christofleau's books and pamphlets, fueled rumors of a breakthrough that defied every rule of soil science. The photos ran in French gardening magazines and local newspapers, often paired with claims of harvests twice the usual size, sometimes even more. Yet outside of Christofleau's circle, few could say where these pictures came from or who had verified them. The British Electroculture Committee, established in 1918 under the Ministry of Agriculture, took notice. By the early 1920s, the committee was gathering reports, reviewing crop images, and sending observers to sites across Europe. Their mandate was simple: separate fact from fantasy. Over nearly 2 decades, until 1936, the committee collected field photographs, yield records, and testimonials from inventors like Christofleau. Their interim reports, stamped not for publication, cataloged everything from giant barley stalks to the peculiar devices sprouting in French gardens. Despite the striking visuals, the committee's files reveal a pattern of unanswered questions. No original negatives or third-party validations for the most dramatic images ever surfaced. The photographs, while persuasive, always seemed to hover between evidence and legend. For every snapshot of a bumper crop, there was a lingering doubt. Could a simple wire and rod truly explain these harvests? The visual record demanded explanation. The search for scientific proof was only just beginning. Every patch of open ground, from city park to rural field, sits beneath an invisible river of electricity. The air above our heads holds a steady charge, positive in the sky and negative in the soil below. Physicists call this the atmospheric potential gradient. On a clear day, the difference between sky and earth is about 100 volts for every meter you climb. It is not lightning, not a jolt you can feel, but a silent voltage always flowing, like a gentle tide. Plants stand right in the middle of this field. Their leaves and stems, covered in microscopic hairs and wax, act as natural conductors. Each blade of grass, each bean sprout, quietly collects electrical charge from the air. Roots buried in the earth connect to the negative pole of this giant natural battery. The plant itself becomes a living antenna, bridging the gap between sky and soil. This is not just a poetic image. The flow of electricity is measurable. In some experiments, a copper rod driven into the ground will register a faint current, proof that the air and earth are exchanging charge, even on a calm day. The voltage gradient can change with weather, but the basic pattern holds. Sky positive, earth negative, a difference that never sleeps. For most of history, this background field went unnoticed. But in the early 20th century, experimenters like Christofleau wondered if plants needed more than water and nutrients. They asked whether this silent current could be tapped, harnessed, or amplified. The idea was simple. If every plant is already an antenna, what happens when you give it a better one? A copper wire, for instance, is far more conductive than a stem or a leaf. Planted in the ground, it can pull in atmospheric charge more efficiently, channeling it right to the root zone. The Earth's natural electric field is subtle, but it is always present. Understanding this invisible energy is the first step toward grasping how a single wire might change everything in the garden. Inside every plant, a silent conversation unfolds in the language of electricity. Roots, stems, and leaves don't just carry water and nutrients. They transmit tiny electrical signals known as action potentials and variation potentials that ripple through cells at the speed of life. These signals are not random. They act as messengers, triggering changes in growth, photosynthesis, and even how a plant responds to stress or injury. When a tomato leaf is wounded, for example, an electrical wave travels down the stem, alerting distant cells to prepare their defenses. This is plant physiology at its most basic, a living circuit tuned to its environment. Researchers have measured these signals using fine electrodes, charting the flickers of voltage that pass from cell to cell. Even a faint field, just a few microvolts per meter, can spark a chain reaction. The plant's internal wiring responds to changes in its surroundings, whether from sunlight, wind, or the subtle pull of the Earth's electric field. Some studies show that when exposed to an external electrical gradient, plants ramp up antioxidant production and activate genes tied to resilience and growth. The effect is not limited to injury or weather. It can be triggered by the simplest of tools, a wire, a rod, or even a carefully shaped coil. The spiral, a shape found everywhere in nature from snail shells to sunflower heads, became a key symbol in early electroculture. Inventors like Christofleau and his contemporaries believed that a copper spiral planted in the soil could capture and focus the Earth's telluric currents. The geometry wasn't just for show. Spirals act like antennas, gathering energy from a wide area and channeling it to a single point. Early coil designs, inspired by both ancient traditions and new physics, aim to amplify the plant's natural signals, not override them. The idea was simple: use geometry to tune into the frequencies already present in the field, letting biology and physics work together. This intersection of shape, signal, and soil is where electroculture parts ways with chemical farming. Instead of force-feeding plants with synthetic nutrients, the goal became to unlock the electrical pathways that evolution built into every living cell. The copper wire, shaped and oriented with care, was more than a conductor. It was a key, one that promised to open new doors in the science of growing food. By the early 1920s, the business of growing food was about to change forever. Factories in Germany and the United States began churning out synthetic ammonia on a scale the world had never seen. The Haber-Bosch process, once a wartime secret, now filled train cars and cargo ships with bags of chemical fertilizer. Production soared from just over 1 million tons per year to nearly 20 million tons per year by 1960, driving the price of ammonia down from $100 a ton to less than $30 a ton. But the real innovation was not in the chemistry, it was in the business model. Farmers who once relied on compost or a one-time copper wire now faced a new kind of contract: buy fertilizer every spring or risk a smaller harvest. The subscription was built in. Each season, another purchase. Each year, another invoice. The market swelled as more growers signed on, drawn by the promise of bigger yields and easy application. The fertilizer industry became a giant, its profits tied to annual sales, not lasting solutions. In this new economy, a method that worked forever with a single piece of wire was not just an alternative, it was a threat. Editors and academics drew a line in the soil. Newspaper columns began to treat electroculture as a curiosity, not a contender. Headlines leaned on words like miracle claims and eccentric methods, often lumping Christofleau's work in with perpetual motion machines and other scientific outliers. Agricultural journals, once open to new ideas, quietly closed their doors. Manuscripts went unanswered, and letters to the editor found no reply. University researchers, pressed for funding and wary of ridicule, steered clear of public support. The British Electroculture Committee's own findings, stamped not for publication, rarely reached the wider scientific world. In the most influential circles, electroculture was quietly boxed in as fringe science. The conversation shifted from what the method could do to whether it was even worth discussing. By the late 1930s, the story of copper wires and atmospheric energy had been reduced to footnotes and folklore. The question of proof faded, replaced by a silent agreement that some experiments were too strange for polite company. The search for solid, modern evidence would have to wait for another generation. In recent years, the search for proof moved from old patents and garden photos to vast stretches of farmland. In China, researchers at the Chinese Academy of Agricultural Sciences set out to test the idea of atmospheric electricity on a scale never attempted before. Their experiment covered 3,600 hectares, an area larger than 6,000 football fields, using high-voltage wires suspended above the crops. The setup did not rely on fertilizer or pesticides. Instead, it harnessed the natural electric field between sky and earth, much like the early pioneers had imagined, but on a scale that could feed a city. The results were hard to ignore. Across the trial fields, yields climbed by nearly 30%. That meant more wheat, more rice, more vegetables, without adding a single drop of synthetic fertilizer. The most surprising outcome was not just bigger harvests. Pesticide use dropped dramatically, in some cases by as much as 70 to 100%. Farmers reported fewer insects and healthier plants, even in regions where pests had once been impossible to control. These were results farmers could see and measure. This was not a backyard experiment or a lucky season. The study by the Chinese Academy of Agricultural Sciences brought the concept of electroculture into institutional science, with numbers large enough to silence claims of coincidence. The data showed that plants, when given access to the Earth's natural currents, could thrive on energy that had always been there, free, silent, and waiting just above the soil. For the first time in nearly a century, the old claims of harvests, multiplied by wire and weather, had real, measurable backing at a national scale. Not every method that claims to boost plant growth works the same way or carries the same risks. The copper spiral used in passive electroculture relies entirely on the natural voltage difference between the sky and the soil. There is no external power source, no batteries, and no wires plugged into the wall. The copper wire simply acts as a better antenna, quietly collecting the gentle charge that is already present in the air. This approach stands in stark contrast to powered rigs that run high-voltage electricity through fields. Those systems use transformers or generators to send strong electrical currents across suspended wires, sometimes at thousands of volts. While such setups have produced measurable results in controlled studies, they come with serious and dangerous hazards. Direct exposure to high voltage lines can cause electric shock, fires, or damage to sensitive equipment. Even a small wiring mistake can turn a garden experiment into a dangerous situation. Passive copper spirals, on the other hand, are as simple as a weather vane. They pose no electrical danger to people or pets, and they do not interfere with nearby electronics. The only energy they harness is what the earth and sky provide naturally. This distinction matters. Confusing the two methods could lead to accidents or to disappointment if someone expects dramatic results from a homemade coil wired to a car battery. The safety and simplicity of passive electroculture are part of its appeal. It is a method that anyone can try, with nothing to plug in and nothing to fear. But it is important to know where the line is drawn and to keep experiments firmly on the safe side of that line. A simple copper spiral planted in the soil can turn any backyard into a living experiment. The method is not complicated, but precision matters. Start with a length of 14-gauge bare copper wire, about as thick as a sturdy paperclip. Wrap it into a loose spiral, aiming for a diameter between 5 and 20 centimeters. Some homesteaders use a wooden dowel 12 to 16 millimeters wide as a form to keep the coil even. The finished spiral should have at least 3 turns, spaced so that air and light reach through the gaps. Once shaped, drive the dowel into the soil so the spiral sits 10 to 15 centimeters deep, with the top end pointing just above the surface. The crucial detail is the tip of the spiral must face magnetic north. A cheap compass does the trick. Do not skip this step. The Earth's telluric currents flow north to south, and orientation can mean the difference between a healthy boost and no effect at all. Position the coil 10 to 20 centimeters from the base of your plant. Tomatoes, beans, and squash all respond well, but some gardeners report the most dramatic results with leafy greens. To track changes, record the height, leaf size, and pest activity every 2 weeks. Take photos and weigh your harvest at the end of the season. One grower in Ohio logged a 40% increase in lettuce yield, with fewer aphids and no powdery mildew. He kept everything else the same soil and the same water, and used just 1 copper spiral per row. The results may vary, but the method is safe, silent, and requires no electricity beyond what nature provides. For anyone willing to try, the experiment costs less than a cup of coffee and could change the way you think about what is possible in a garden. Today, global fertilizer use tops 185 million tons a year, while soil health declines and costs soar. As growers seek sustainable answers, the real question is not if electroculture works everywhere, but why simple, low-cost experiments threaten trillion-dollar industries. When free energy meets corporate resistance, progress slows for everyone. The harvest of the future depends on what we dare to rediscover. What would you try if profit was not in charge?